Over 800 castles built before 1500 still stand in England. Most are ruins, stone skeletons open to the sky, stabilized by English heritage, visited by school groups who eat packed lunches on grass that used to be great halls. Some are museums, roped off rooms, laminated placards, guided tours that end at the gift shop. But 10 of them are still someone's actual home, not estates that were abandoned and later restored, not heritage projects with a caretaker in the gatehouse, homes where the hearth never went cold, where families live today in the same rooms their ancestors occupied when the Black Death arrived, when Henry VIII broke with Rome, when Cromwell's cannons tore holes in the walls. These are castles where someone is doing laundry in a building older than the English language. 10 of them, all built before 1500, all still occupied. By entry 1, the idea that a castle needs to be empty to be historic will feel like something you were told but never questioned. 1. Sizergh Castle, Cumbria, near Kendal, gateway to the Lake District, visible from the A591 if you know where to look, built in 1340. Not as a status symbol, but as survival architecture. Northern England was a war zone during the Second War of Scottish Independence. Pelly towers like this were fortified refuge points against raids. You built one because your neighbours kept getting burned out. The Strickland family built it, and they never left. Not during the Wars of the Roses, when they sided with the Yorkists and the crown changed hands 5 times in 30 years. Not during the Reformation, when they sheltered Catholic priests, a crime punishable by death, and somehow avoided execution. Not during the English Civil War, when choosing the wrong side could cost you everything. 750 years, same family, same building. England changed religions 3 times. Fought a civil war, executed a king, abolished the monarchy, then brought it back. The Stricklands locked the door and waited it out. In 1950, they donated the castle to the National Trust, but kept private apartments. The compromise between heritage preservation and the fact that this is still someone's home. The medieval Great Hall is open to tourists seasonally, then closed for private family events. You can visit the room where a Strickland sat in 1340. Then a Strickland who lives there now goes upstairs and checks their phone. While England tore itself apart over who should be king and what god should be worshipped, one family just stayed put for 7.5 centuries. 2. Croft Castle, Herefordshire, near Leominster on the Welsh Marches, border country where England ended and something contested began. Built in the 1300s during the reign of Edward I, just after the conquest of Wales. The Marcher Lords had semi-autonomous power out here. Not quite English law, not quite Welsh territory. You held what you could defend. The Croft family held it. From the 1300s until 1750, over 400 years, this was theirs. Then financial ruin forced a sale. The family left. Most families lose their childhood home and move on. Grieve, maybe. Tell stories about it. Eventually stop driving past. The Crofts spent 173 years plotting to get it back. Generations who never lived there still told their children, that's ours. Kept the memory alive like a blood debt. Passed down not just the name, but the obsession. In 1923, they bought it back. 173 years, 6 generations in exile, then 1 generation that returned. The National Trust owns it now, manages public access, runs the tours, but descendants of the Croft family remain involved in its stewardship, not as employees, but as something closer to haunting. This is a family that was evicted by economics and refused to accept it as permanent. Most inheritance is money, property, stories. The Crofts inherited a 400-year-old grudge, and the patience to see it through. 3. Hever Castle, Kent, near Edenbridge, in the Weald countryside, commuter belt to London now, but in 1270, this was deep forest, clay soil, isolated enough that you fortified your manor house just in case. By 1500, it belonged to Thomas Boleyn. His daughter Anne grew up here, learned French, played music in these rooms, later became Queen of England until Henry VIII had her executed in 1536. She never came home. The Boleyns fell. The castle passed through hands, decayed, and by 1900 it was rotting into the ground. Roof timbers, collapsing, walls held up by ivy. Then William Waldorf Astor, American millionaire, had never met Anne Boleyn, had no connection to this place whatsoever, bought it and poured a fortune into restoration. Not preservation, restoration. He rebuilt entire sections, installed plumbing, created a Tudor village on the grounds because the castle alone wasn't enough. The Guthrie family owns it now, through inheritance from the Astors. It's open to the public, but private quarters remain off limits. Weddings are held here, corporate events. Private family life coexists with tourism. Anne Boleyn never returned. But 400 years later, a man who'd never heard her voice spent millions to make sure her childhood home survived. Most castles are saved by the families who built them. This one was saved by foreign wealth and an obsession with someone else's history. 4. Bamburgh Castle, Northumberland, perched on volcanic rock overlooking the North Sea, fortified since 547 AD, back when this was the Anglo-Saxon kingdom of Bernicia and England didn't exist yet. The Normans built the keep around 1100, turned it into a royal fortress, one of the most strategically important sites in the country. You held Bamburgh, you controlled the north. In 1464, during the Wars of the Roses, it became the first English castle to fall to gunpowder artillery. Cannons tore through medieval walls that were supposed to be impregnable. The age of fortification ended here. Then it was left to rot. By the 1700s, Bamburgh was a ruin. Roofless, collapsing, stone scavenged by locals for building material. In 1894, Victorian industrialist William Armstrong bought it. Most men in his position built mansions. Armstrong moved into a bombed-out medieval fortress and refused to let it stay dead. He installed electricity, hydraulic lifts, central heating, dragged a 1,000-year-old castle into modernity through sheer bloody-mindedness. The Armstrong family still lives in private apartments within the castle. Sections remain off-limits to tourists. Bedrooms, kitchens, living rooms in a building older than the English language. You can tour the Norman Keep, where cannons broke through in 1464. Then the family goes upstairs and makes dinner in a castle that survived gunpowder, decay, and Victorian industrial ambition. 5. Alnwick Castle, Northumberland, 30 miles from the Scottish border, built in 1096, right after the Norman conquest, to hold the northern frontier when holding it meant something. The Percy family acquired it in 1309. They're still here, through 42 monarchs, through the Wars of the Roses, when Henry Percy, Shakespeare's Hotspur, died in battle against Henry IV. Through attainder, when the crown seized their lands and stripped their titles for rebellion, they clawed their way back. Every single time. You can execute a Percy, you can take their wealth, their titles, their legal right to exist as nobility. You cannot make them leave. The Duke and Duchess of Northumberland live in private apartments now. The castle opens to tourists seasonally. You've seen it in Harry Potter, in Downton Abbey, in a dozen period dramas that needed a real medieval fortress. But when the tours end and the film crews pack up, the family is still here. Not as museum caretakers, not as heritage managers, as Percys. Same bloodline, same castle, same stubborn refusal to be displaced that kept them here through centuries when kings wanted them gone. England has had 42 monarchs since 1309. The Percys have had one address, 6, Berkeley Castle, Gloucestershire, between Bristol and Gloucester, overlooking the Severn Estuary, built in 1067 by William the Conqueror's ally, rebuilt in stone by 1153. The Berkeley family has lived here since 1153, 847 years, one family, one castle. England has changed languages since then, changed religions, abolished the monarchy, then reinstated it, fought 2 world wars. The Berkeleys just stayed. In 1327, King Edward II was imprisoned in one of these rooms, then murdered. The method is debated. Medieval chronicles say red-hot poker. Modern historians argue suffocation. But the location is not. He died here. Royal blood on Berkeley floors. The family has lived with that for 7 centuries. You can tour the murder room today. Stand where a king was killed. Read the placard explaining what probably happened. Then the Berkeley family, Charles Berkeley and his children, go upstairs to the private apartments and eat dinner. Most historic homes are historic because no one lives there anymore. This one is historic because someone always has. Through the Black Death, through the Reformation, through the English Civil War, when choosing wrong could cost you everything, the Berkeleys chose survival, not loyalty to any particular king or cause, just persistence. 847 years of it. 7. Arundel Castle, West Sussex, near the South Downs, visible from the A27, built on Christmas Day 1067, the same year as the Tower of London. William the Conqueror gave it to Roger de Montgomery, his most trusted ally, to control the south coast. By 1580, it passed to the Howard family, Dukes of Norfolk, England's premier Catholic aristocrats. They're still here. During the English Civil War, Arundel was besieged twice. Parliamentarian cannons blew holes in the walls. After surrender, it was partially ruined, open to the sky, stone stripped for road building. The Howards spent 2 centuries rebuilding it, while staying Catholic in a Protestant country where that could get you executed. No political power, no legal protection, just faith and the kind of stubbornness that rebuilds cannon-blasted walls stone by stone, because leaving was never an option. The Duke of Norfolk, Edward FitzAlan Howard, 18th Duke, lives in private apartments now. The castle opens seasonally. Weddings happen in the grounds. Tourists walk rooms the family still uses. Most families bent with the Reformation, converted, survived by changing. The Howards stayed Catholic when it was treason, rebuilt after their home was destroyed, and they're still here. 8. Skipton Castle, North Yorkshire, gateway to the Yorkshire Dales, controlling the Aire Gap, a strategic pass through the Pennines fortified since 1090, rebuilt in stone in 1310 by Robert de Clifford. The Cliffords were warrior lords. Butcher Clifford killed the teenage Earl of Rutland during the Wars of the Roses, stabbed him on Wakefield Bridge after the Battle of Wakefield in 1460. This was a family that held ground. From this point forward, every entry is about something else entirely. Families that never left, chains that never broke. During the English Civil War, Skipton became one of the last royalist strongholds in the north. 3-year siege, 1642 to 1645. Cromwell's forces surrounded it, cut off supplies, bombarded the walls. The garrison held. When it finally surrendered, not stormed, surrendered, Parliament ordered it partially demolished. Slighted, in the language of the time, walls breached, towers reduced. A message: this is what happens when you resist. The Clifford family looked at the rubble and filled the holes back in. Not decades later, not after the Restoration when it was safe. Immediately, Parliament blew holes in the walls. The Cliffords just kept building. Privately owned now, open to the public, but never nationalised. Never surrendered to English heritage or the National Trust. A castle that endured a 3-year siege, survived a demolition order, and refused to become a ruin because the family refused to leave. 9. Warwick Castle, Warwickshire, on the River Avon in the heart of the Midlands, built in 1068 by William the Conqueror to suppress Saxon resistance after the conquest, rebuilt in stone by 1260, home to the Beaumont family, then the Beauchamp, then the Earls of Warwick, who became power brokers during the Wars of the Roses. Richard Neville, Warwick the Kingmaker, lived here. The man who put Edward IV on the throne in 1461, then tried to remove him a decade later. He didn't just fight in the Wars of the Roses, he decided who wore the crown. In 1604, the Greville family acquired it. Earls of Warwick. They lived here for 374 years, through the English Civil War, through the dissolution of political power that once came with a castle like this, through 2 world wars and the collapse of the system that made aristocracy viable. In 1978, the 8th Earl sold it to Madame Tussauds, not to another family, not to the National Trust, to the company that makes wax statues of celebrities, crippling death duties, maintenance costs in the millions, a building too large to heat, too expensive to preserve, too important to abandon. The family left. It's a theme park now. Merlin Entertainments runs it. You can attend medieval banquets, watch jousting reenactments, tour the staterooms where actual earls once governed, but no one lives there. For 900 years, this was a family home. Then economics ended what sieges and civil wars couldn't. This is the cautionary tale. What happens when the money runs out and no one can afford to stay? 10. Raby Castle, County Durham, near Staindrop, edge of the North Pennines, built around 1360 by the Neville family during the reign of Edward III, when England was flush with plunder from French campaigns during the 100 Years' War. The Nevilles were among the most powerful families in the north. They built fortresses, brokered marriages, decided which king to support when the Wars of the Roses turned England into a knife fight between cousins. In 1569, the Rising of the North was launched from here, a Catholic rebellion against Elizabeth I, an attempt to remove her from the throne, restore the old faith, put Mary Queen of Scots in her place. It failed, catastrophically. The Nevilles were attainted, land seized, titles erased. This castle, the launchpad for treason, should have been torn down as a warning. Instead, it passed to the crown, then to the Vane family in 1626, who still live here. The 12th Lord Barnard and his family occupy private apartments. The castle opens seasonally. Tours through medieval halls, the Baron's Hall where the rebellion was planned, kitchens that haven't stopped functioning in 660 years. Then the tours end. The family remains, not the Nevilles. They're gone, erased by treason. But someone stayed, a different bloodline, a different name, same castle, same unbroken chain of human habitation reaching back to when this was the most dangerous building in England. Ground zero for treason, still standing, still lived in. Because even when history demands a building fall, someone has to be stubborn enough to stay inside it. By now, the idea that a castle should be empty to be historic feels like something you were told but never questioned. Like ruins are more authentic than occupied halls. Like preservation requires absence. Like a building only matters once the people leave. These 10 castles prove otherwise. They are not museums, not monuments managed by English Heritage with plaques explaining what used to happen here. They are kitchens, bedrooms, living rooms where someone checks their phone in a building older than the English language, where families stayed through wars that should have displaced them, through economic collapse that should have forced a sale, through taxation and siege and demolition orders that should have ended the chain, and yet the hearth never went cold. Not metaphorically, literally. Someone has lived in these buildings continuously since the 1300s, the 1100s, in Berkeley's case since 1153. An unbroken thread of human presence spanning centuries when everything else changed. England changed religions 3 times, fought a civil war, executed a king, abolished the monarchy, then brought it back. The castle stayed occupied. That is what separates these 10 from the 800 others. Not that they survived, that families refused to leave. Through rebellion and attainder, through cannon fire and financial ruin, through the slow economic strangulation that turned most aristocratic seats into car boot sales and hotel conversions. Some held by sheer bloodline stubbornness. The Stricklands, the Percys, the Berkeleys, who simply never left. Some held by obsession, the Crofts who spent 173 years plotting to return. Armstrong who dragged a ruin into modernity because he refused to let it die. One lost entirely. Warwick, sold in 1978 when the money ran out, now a theme park where no one sleeps. That is the trade-off. You stay by opening the doors, by letting strangers walk through your kitchen, by turning your inheritance into a business because the alternative is selling to someone who makes wax statues. Most of these families survive now by compromise. Seasonal tours, wedding venues, private apartments tucked behind roped-off corridors. They are relics of a system that no longer exists, holding onto fortresses built to project power they no longer have. But they still have the keys, still live in rooms where kings were murdered, where rebellions were launched, where siege cannons tore through walls that were rebuilt stone by stone, still hang laundry in courtyards where medieval garrisons once drilled, still make dinner in kitchens that have been cooking meals since before the Black Death. These are not the grandest castles in England, not the most visited, not the ones on postcards. They are the ones where someone still lives, where history is not something that happened and ended, but something continuing in the same place it always did, because 10 families across centuries simply refuse to be part of the past.